Willow Creek Springs presents Healthy Living with your host, Joe Grumbine.
Well, hello and welcome back to the Healthy Living Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Grumbine, and I have with me again today Dr. Robert Hoffman. And I want to reintroduce Robert because as my life is changing, the impact of our experience has changed as well. And Robert Hoffman is a scientist, and he has been working, he's a discoverer and a paradigm changer. And many years ago, he discovered a mechanism where cancer cells are addicted to an amino acid called methionine, and he's dedicated his life to uh, publishing and testing and studying and developing an enzyme to help people. And Robert, I'm so grateful that you're here with us today.
Well, thank you, Joe, and I'm really grateful to be with you. You're a great model for cancer patients.
Well, I never imagined in a million years that would be the case. And for the listeners, I want to take a step back. We're going to do it very briefly, but about 7-8 years ago, my father passed away. I was 50 pounds overweight, had a stressful life, and I got a wake-up call. I was going to become him. And I began a journey of health at that point, about 7-8 years ago. I lost 50 pounds. I learned a lot of things. I thought I learned a lot of things. And, I've been working with cannabis medicine for 40 years, been working with cancer patients. I thought I knew about cancer. I thought I knew some things. I watched things that I did work and help people. And I made assumptions based on those observations. And I created a paradigm for myself about what health was. I did things, I tried them, I tested, I experienced, I followed as much of a scientific method as I could. And then 6 months ago, I got diagnosed with squamous cell carcinoma, and my life changed dramatically. This was a very aggressive head and neck cancer that was already big. And I realized very quickly that I needed to solve this or it was going to undo me. And in the process, I thought I was doing everything right. So I'm fasting. I'm cut out my sugar and carbs. I'm being very rigorous. But I was eating protein as my primary fuel source. I was eating tons of protein. And as I'm going from doctor to doctor and studying and learning and starting to go, wow, nobody agrees. I'm wrong about some things. And I'm putting more and more focus at this, more and more focus. I'm like, I can't mess this up. So I start researching and meeting. I stumbled upon this article about methionine somewhere in my research. And then I stumbled upon this enzyme methioninase. And I went to go say, well, where can I find this stuff? I thought I could buy it on Amazon. And there was only one name came up. And I said, all right. So there was an email address. I sent an email to that address. I said, I want to buy some methionase. I don't know anything more than that. And I got a response. Said, give me a call. And Robert, that's where our journey began, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
And from that point, you invited me to a phone call. You said, come join this call. We do every Sunday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and we got a group of people together, and we talk about all this. And I sat on that first call and listened, and it has been instrumental. And your willingness to come on the show. And, I mentioned the whole paradigm thing because I believe that, you're a pioneer. I'm a pioneer. Some people that are willing to take chances and study things are pioneers, but sometimes we're just wrong. We think something is a certain thing. We assign a value to things. And as a scientist, a lot of times we'll just observe, right? You notice a thing and you go, oh, well, we make an assumption. Tell me how you went. You've been studying this enzyme and how it works and replicating things and publishing papers and going through the rigors of science. Why don't you share a little bit about that? Because I think that's really important for people to understand.
Okay, well, I got into this area of methionine addiction a little bit. I don't want to say by accident, but let's say by luck. Um, I joined a lab at the Massachusetts General Hospital because I wanted to learn how to culture animal cells. And my direct supervisor, Richard Irby, he's now passed away, unfortunately. His main interest was methionine. I had no interest about methionine, but I was in Dr. Irby's lab. I had to learn about it. It was so boring. This pathway, that pathway, who cares? Then by chance, I read a couple papers that said cancer cells can't grow on the precursor of methionine. It's called homocysteine, and normal cells can grow. And I said, wow, that's really, really big. I said, really big. My boss, he didn't have any interest in it at all, but he didn't stop me. And I said, okay, I want to work on this. So I cultured some cancer cells on methionine. I cultured some on homocysteine in place of methionine. I cultured normal cells the same way, with and without methionine. The normal cells didn't care. Methionine, homocysteine, they both grew. They grew on both media. The cancer cells wouldn't grow on homocysteine. They grew beautifully on methionine. They had this, at that time, we called methionine dependence. And then some paper came out and said, oh, the cancer cells can't make methionine. Well, I did a whole bunch of tests, and I found the cancer cells made tons of methionine. But despite that, they making their own, they needed an external source. And years later, many years, decades later, I understood that this was an addiction. So in those early days, I tried to study the mechanism. And we weren't the first to develop the methionase enzyme. The first, I think, was Dr. Kreis and Sloan Kettering. But he didn't continue the work. Then in the 90s, we're talking now, fast forward from the 70s to the 90s, we started developing our own methionase. And we found that this methionase could slow or arrest the growth of tumors growing in mice. And we found that if you combined it with chemotherapy, it worked even better. And we even put it into some human patients, kind of a one-off by IV. And we found that it depleted all the methionine in their blood. And then we did some studies in China in monkeys, and we killed a monkey because the methionase is a bacterial enzyme so foreign to the monkey. If you treat them once, they're okay. But if you keep treating them, they develop a severe allergy called anaphylaxis, which can be lethal.
Right.
So we, over the next 15 years, we were really low key, kind of depressed, working on other projects, a little bit of methionase. And then around 2017 or 18, Dr. Han and Dr. Kawaguchi in the lab showed that you could take methionase by mouth, totally safe. No anaphylaxis, nothing. It stayed in the gut. And that it's very unusual for a protein, an enzyme that can survive in the gut, which is very low pH, very acid, full
It's
of
designed to dissolve things, right?
Sorry?
It's designed to dissolve things.
Yeah. So it's not, proteins are not designed really to survive in the gut. We eat a hamburger, all the proteins get broken down into their component amino acids, and the body uses those amino acids to construct your own personal enzymes that
Right.
your immune system won't react to. They become you. So anyway, we were lucky, so lucky. And a couple of years later, we started with patients. Dr. Hahn took some himself, very brave researcher, no problem. So for the last 4 or 5 years, we've given patients, around 350 patients have taken methionase at least one time. And one thing we learned for sure, it's completely safe. Although we have tons of studies in the lab that show methionase is effective against every kind of cancer, and almost every kind of chemotherapy makes it work better. We haven't done a clinical trial, but we've published 12 case reports, some of them very promising. We can't make a claim because almost every case, the patient was taking multiple things.
Right.
Two of our breast cancer patients that had very metastatic disease went into remission. Very serious leukemia case, she's in remission. A rectal cancer, metastatic rectal cancer case, was close to remission, doing good. A liver cancer case has gone into kind of steady state. The lady is very much alive. So we have a lot of results. We can't make a claim because almost all the patients were treated with other agents, but we're very encouraged. And we got 2 or 3 stage 4 pancreatic cancer patients now that are hanging in there. We had one previously, she's going into her 5th year, stage 4. She's alive. She takes methionase and keeps taking her chemo and low methionine diet. I tell the patients it's encouraging, but I tell everyone, we can't make any claims and every patient's different, but here's what we know. Here's what we've learned so far. We've published most of it. So that's kind of the story, Joe.
It's a powerful story, and
it's over 50 years. I mean, I did a little bit of time warp in my summary, but I started this project in 1973.
Wow. That's truly a life's
81
work.
years old, still doing it. So, and like you said, it's a paradigm shift. So for the last 100 years, the paradigm has been cancer cells are addicted to glucose.
Right.
Stems from the research of a German scientist called Warburg, Warburg, the Warburg effect.
Yeah, that's what I knew.
Methionine addiction is the Hoffman effect. That's what it's called now.
Love it.
But there's sure a heck of a lot of resistance. The so-called opinion leaders don't want to go near it. They don't want a paradigm shift. They want to stay with their paradigm, which has given them fame and fortune.
Exactly.
They ain't moving. And they put out a lot of disinformation about yours truly.
I can imagine.
And they try to ostracize me, never communicate me, don't invite me to meetings, don't let me publish in the so-called fancy journals. And one of my favorite students, I had kind of not only teacher-student relation with, but kind of grandpa, grandson. He went dark on me because his boss told him to stay away from me. So that's, if you're reading Kuhn's book, you know.
I am. Read it
what they
once,
did
I'm
to
going to read it
me,
again.
I mean, Kuhn's book will tell a little bit. For example, when Bruno tried to say that the sun was just a typical star, they burned him at the stake in the middle of Rome upside down. That was in the year 1500, I think.
Exactly. And that's not that long ago.
In the big picture, not that long ago. And a paradigm shift, very hard. The great scientist called Max Planck, I'm not giving the proper German pronunciation there, he discovered quantum mechanics. And he said, cancer progresses one funeral at a time.
So true.
The opinion leader has to die.
Yes.
And Kuhn certainly agrees with that. So here we are. So actually our Zoom call is kind of the leading edge of the very nascent paradigm shift, which is over a half century trying to get out of its little rabbit hole, if you want to call it. I don't know. So that's where they are. So who's leading the paradigm shift? The patients.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I took this torch when I realized what I was dealing with. You know, I've worked with cannabis medicine for 40 years, and there's powerful medicine there, and it has its own amazing values. But I was wrong about things about it because my paradigm included observations, and there's not enough research that backs any of it up because it's been illegal for so long. And so we just watch and we make assumptions and observe. And that's where a lot of problems come from. We don't have anybody pointing out the downside. Nobody's trying to challenge it. Nobody's really studying it in a way that makes sense. And, you know, there's in Kuhn's book, there's all these different motivators for a paradigm shift. And one of them is just a simple urgency. There's a big problem that needs to be solved. And that's one of the ways paradigm shift. Well, that's where it shifted for me personally. So I'm now part of a big shift, but my paradigm had to shift in order for that to happen. All the things I believed about health, they weren't all wrong, but some of the fundamental principles that I relied on to make judgments and answers and advice and treating myself and everything, when I realized that I had missed a part that was a fundamental part, it changed everything. And I began a totally different approach. All the doctors that I've been talking to, nobody agrees on anything. I've talked to one doctor, said I don't have cancer. I talked to a surgeon, said, well, this is what we need. I talked to a radiation doctor. He said, this is what we need. I talked to a chemo doctor. She says, this is what we need. Talked to an integrative guy. He says, this is what we need. Nobody's agreed on anything.
Because there's no solid science yet, Joe.
Yes, exactly. So then when we start talking, and I start talking to all these people, 20 people, 30 people sometimes, and we all have this in common. We all are dealing with cancer ourselves personally. And in this journey, I came to realize that there isn't just cancer. Everybody's cancer is unique. And everybody's answer is unique, even though there are common threads. So we have pillars like, you know, glucose is a thing. I mean, cancer feeds off of it, but methionine is a thing. And if you don't address that thing, the glucose doesn't matter anything because it's gonna feed and grow, and you know, unless you starve yourself to death, the cancer's gonna go on. And everybody has different switches, everybody has different things that cause it to happen, everybody has their own metabolism, their own set of problems. And as a patient, as a person who's dealing with a problem like this, you need to get involved as deeply as you can. And what I learned on a quantum level is that everything's energy, right? And you have this amount of energy in amount of time, and whatever you put towards it you have the ability to make a change. And I was able to, and I actually call it a blessing now because I'm not dying the way I was a couple weeks ago. But my ability to focus all this energy on this allowed me to see some things clearly. And in our conversations, you've been with me for now over 3 months, and you've watched the tumor grow and get oppressive. I wasn't sleeping. I hadn't slept in 3 months. This thing was choking me out. It was almost twice the size that it is right now. And I was desperate. I had a radiation doctor that wouldn't clear my treatment that they wanted to do. I had dental problems, and we were talking in this meeting and just personally, and you came up with this notion. You said, there's a way to go about this. There's a neoadjuvant solution that we could go with a chemo only treatment and buy us some time, maybe shrink this thing down and get a handle on it. And I said, wow, that sounds beautiful. And in my life, chemo was the devil. I would have never accepted that as a possibility. It was natural or nothing. You come to realize there's all these different pieces to an answer. This thing didn't come to me for just one thing. I didn't just have one problem. I had all kinds of things that caused it. And the answer isn't necessarily going to be just one thing, much as many people will try to sell you. And so I've been building oxygen therapy and nutrition and all these fasting and all these different things to build this. But this group that we have, it's a collective consciousness. We have all these people that have shared their experience. And out of that, we're gaining true knowledge because we're able to bounce it off of each other and say, well, this worked for me. Well, that didn't work for me. Well, you can learn from that. And in this group, Dr. Exime and some of the other folks, we talked about the fasting prior to chemo. We talked about the oxygen therapy. We talked about really going hard on the methionine restriction, methioninase, and then coupling that with a chemo treatment and really causing like a supercharger effect. You got a race car that's good and strong, bolt on a supercharger and it doubles its horsepower. Well, it turns out that these things, I was literally at the place where I was looking at a darkness. I was like, I'm going to keep going, but I don't know what I'm going to do. And at the last second, I get approval. At the last second, this tumor that was weeping and giving me all problems cleared up just enough. They put a port in me. I got my first chemo treatment just under 2 weeks ago. And Dr. Hoffman, why don't you share with me what you're seeing?
I barely recognize you, Joe.
I was.
I mean, it's striking.
Yes.
The decrease of that tumor. It's striking.
Yes. And we talked about what might happen. In my mind, I do it, the energy, the prayer, all of it. And I saw everything the best could happen. But I want to share with you this thing. My goal was to get the most effect and the least amount of harm. And that was what all this was about, right? All the dieting, the fasting, the methionase, everything, all of it. And when I got the first treatment, I got, the two drugs, the docetaxel and the cisplatin. And then I got home with a pump that pumped in the 5-fluorouracil for 5 days. And they told me about the side effects and they gave me a bunch of drugs for the nausea, and they told me that I'm going to be exhausted. I'm going to have nausea, vomiting. I could have headaches. I could have ulcers in my mouth. I get bone pain, all of these things they told me. And I says, okay, I'm going to brace for it best as I can. I had already been fasting. So now all of a sudden my weight's down. I got to get my weight back up. So I spent a few days just trying to eat and just rest and, acclimate to this. And you guys, we did the meeting just before I did chemo. And then we did another meeting a week afterward. And you were able to see a difference from one to the next. I've been on a roller coaster ride with the chemo side of things. But to everybody I've talked to, they've all said you had less side effects than I've ever seen. The amount of
because of the fasting around the chemo time.
Exactly. It completely worked 100%. And I have been, I dropped weight. I hit my line where I won't cross. So I've been steadily building my weight up again. You know, with this diet, it's hard. It's hard to get the calories in, but we just do it. We just figure it out and we just do it. And I did get some sores in my mouth, but I got this, buffer saline solution. I've just been switching it over and over. It really helps a lot. I noticed that the nausea medicine, the side effects are constipation and headaches. And to me, that's hell. I said, I'd rather be nauseous. And so I said, okay, I'm going to deal with the nausea. But once again, I'm like, wait a minute. I know something, and I got disillusioned because the cannabis oil that I was taking was wrong for me. And Dr. Castro luckily pointed it out. He says, you're flipping off switches that's causing it not to be effective, and your chemo won't even work right. And so I stopped it immediately. And I really got a broken heart over it. I spent 30 years advocating for that plant and working with it and formulating, and I just kind of put it on a shelf like like a scorned girlfriend. But then the other night I was sitting there and I was nauseous and I didn't feel like eating and I didn't feel like moving. And I'm like, I got to get out of this. I got to move and I got to eat. And I remembered, I'm like, wait a minute, what's the one good thing cannabis is for? It's great for nausea and appetite. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try a little bit. I took a teeniest little bit. First time in my life, it was purely medicinal and calmed me down, settled my nausea. I got hungry again. And I've been on a steady incline since that point.
A great story too.
Yeah, and I think the key of it is there is no one hit wonder. There's no one drug. There's no one medicine. There's no one herb. There's no one, not even one practice. You got to build your solution, and you got to find what works for you, and you got to be willing to adjust and pivot. And you got to be open-minded, and you got to be willing to be wrong. I've been wrong on this journey a dozen times. And I was like, okay, change. I just want to live. I want to live, and I want to have a long, healthy, happy life. And I want this cancer out of my body. And that's all I care about. And I just feel that sharing this story here and inviting people to this meeting, the show notes of this, I put a link every week. I encourage anybody, if you have cancer, if you know somebody that has, even if you're not interested in this diet or anything like that, listen, there's people that are sharing amazing stories about their journeys, and they're all tied around this paradigm shift. And I just am so grateful. I keep wanting to come back and share with you. And I feel like I have been able to bring awareness to a dozen doctors and practitioners and 20 or 30 patients, at least put it in their mind. And, Dr. Hoffman, a lot of people have cancer and you look at them and you would never know. And as disfigured as I am and have been, that was actually a blessing, because nobody's ever going to question that I have or had cancer. It's right there for everybody to see. And when I can show you this dramatic change and I can tell you how it happened, I don't know, maybe you'll listen, right?
It's fantastic.
So anyways, my energy level has increased by exponentially. I was actually able to sleep on my left side a couple of days ago for the first time in 6 months. And it's just been, the sleep is all the difference in the world. If you can't sleep, how do you heal?
Yeah,
And
you're in big trouble.
that's where my energy's coming from. Building my appetite, building my strength, and I'm getting ready. I got another week and a few days before my next round, so I'm trying to bulk up as much weight as I can get my strength in. We're ready to go round 2.
You'll be ready.
I know it. Well, thank you so much, Robert. It is just
Joe, thank you for your great story, your inspiration for every patient, and they should listen to you.
well,
Every patient needs to educate yourself. Today, I talked with one of my pancreatic cancer patients, and he said the doctor proposed these two drugs. I said, well, maybe we need, I'll do a little study and you may need something else. Oh, I can't tell the doctor that. I said, you've been on the Zoom. Did you see what Joe did? Of
Oh,
course you
yeah.
can tell the doctor that.
Oh, yeah. You bet. And remember, you're the patient. You hire a doctor. That
You
doctor.
hire a doctor, and
Yes.
the cancer is in your body, not
Yeah.
his or her body.
Yes. 100%. And if you can present yourself to a doctor in a way that says you're taking the time to learn and you have a goal that is not in conflict with theirs. You're just trying to solve a problem, and maybe you present another solution. 9 out of 10 doctors are going to go, well, at least I'll listen to you. They're people.
You would have been if you just followed your doctor. You would have been at this point. You would have been so radiated.
Oh, I would have
And
been.
here's the chemo just by its little self, along with methionase,
Yes.
doing its thing.
Yes. And my goal and my hope is that I'm going to be like Shihiro, and we're going
Have
to
a
have,
good chance to beat. We want to get rid of this thing totally.
yes, 100%.
With the chemo combined with methionase, we got a really good chance for it.
And I'm
The
going at
surgeon
it.
told Chihiro, I want to operate. Why are you going to operate? The cancer's
Right.
gone.
Yes. Yes. And this week I'm going to be getting some blood tests, thanks to Dr. Exume's advice, and I'm going to be getting my own markers so that I'll be able to go, well, here's my baseline and here's where we're at. And the doctors haven't even ordered it, but I'm doing it myself.
Don't count on them to order. You got to do it yourself many times.
Exactly. All right, Robert. Well, thank you so much for taking
Thank
your
you,
time.
Joe.
And
Great meeting, and
yeah,
share it with everybody.
I keep doing it. We'll see you Sunday.
Okay, see you Sunday, Joe.
All right. Have a good one. Thank you.
You too.
This has been another episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. We produce this show so that people can share their stories, people that have overcome obstacles, people that are undergoing obstacles. We're building a community of health-minded individuals. If you're interested in supporting the show, please leave a review on the platform you're listening to it on. If you're interested in becoming a guest, please send an email to itsjoegrumbine@gmail.com, or you can send a note into the notes section of the podcast. All right. Well, thank you for supporting this show, and we hope you've enjoyed it.